Welcome everyone to our April 22nd, 2025 Board of Directors regular meeting. I will now call our meeting to order. Thank you to those attending in person tonight and watching us over Zoom and staying engaged by watching our recording at a later time. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak during community comment, they will need to fill out a speaker form located in the lobby on the table and turn it in to Board Secretary Kim Coven, seated at the table to my left. Comments will take place during the designated community comment portion of our agenda. And before we dive into tonight's agenda, I want to take a moment to introduce those seated at the table with me. To my right, we have Superintendent Degner, Directors Icestone, Eastham, and Williams. I'm President Malone. To my left, we have Vice President Abraham, Directors Finch, Lingo, and Board Secretary Coven. And with that, we will kick it off with our education showcase, and it is Lemmy Elementary and their drummer club.
The board considered our table set. You get a front row seat, yeah.
Go ahead, Charlotte.
Hi. All right, so we're missing a few of our cast. I don't know if they're gonna come in. I might have to play multiple people, so it might seem kind of weird. Faith, you wanna be- you ready? You're just stand right there.
While they're getting organized, Holly Rubel is a 5th grade teacher at Lemmy, and she has our drama club every year and writes plays from scratch. And this year it's one on Helen Lemmy. And I think there is a case of a missing portrait. So we will start
No, don't want the guys.
a case on the missing portrait here.
Stand next to each other.
Across from each other.
All right, I'm going to be playing multiple roles. So, yes, this is just a small fraction of our cast. I think we have about, 50 people officially in it. Some of the roles that they're playing aren't their actual roles, so they're filling in, and we're also missing a few people. So, the play is based on the missing portrait, which is of Helen Lemmy, because we're Lemmy School and there's this beautiful picture of Helen Lemmy. So we thought we would write a script around that portrait getting stolen, and we're trying to figure out who did it. So we won't actually get to the part who did it, and we actually haven't written that part. We're pretty sure the lunch ladies did it, but we don't exactly know. And somehow our twin sisters, who are elderly, and are going to end up with it. So it's kind of complicated, but all right. So here is our judge, Judge Brenner, and the prosecution over here. And we have a baby who's crying in the audience, his mother, and her other daughter, Sally, and then Emily the know-it-all, and then just somebody who makes comments. All right, and I will be the defense and the bailiffs, unless somebody else wants to comment. Okay.
Oh, and what was that you're banking? Oh, hush up, it's not my bag. Look at the headline. Hand me my glasses. And now you're wearing them. Who's wearing them? You're wearing them, no one. Oh, now what's all this about? Helen standards of equal rights. She opened her house to books so that they had a place to live while they were in college. They named the school after her and everything. Now get back here! Something's happened to the portrait of Helen Lenny at Lemming School. They say it's been stolen. What? Stolen? What's the big deal? There's gonna be a court case and everything. It's a big deal. A very big deal. Like a hole in my sock big deal. No silly deal, like running out of butterscotch candy. What? Give me that!
Okay, there are two bailiffs here. Biff, you know this is your first trial. Just want to make sure you know what you're doing. You know. What if I say no?
There she is.
What if I say no?
You don't want to know. Let's just say the first trial is going to be the last.
Well, if I fail, so do you, because you're my mentor.
I'll never admit it. Court is now in session. All rise. The Honorable Judge Brenner is now presiding. The case of, we haven't named the plaintiff or the defendant yet, is now called.
Let's hurry this up. I have a line dancing class in an hour.
Excuse me, Your Honor?
Keep it rolling, Biff.
It's bailiff Biff, not just Biff.
Same thing.
Biff, you're on thin ice here.
Well then, would the plaintiff's attorney like to give an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor. We would like to present to you the case of a missing portrait. This is not just any portrait. This is a prestigious, one-of-a-kind portrait of a very revered woman, Helen Lemmy. The portrait is a symbol of equality, fairness, and justice. The portrait has been hanging in Lemmy Elementary School for the past 50 years. Last month, the portrait was stolen, and someone at the school knows something about it. We will prove to the jury that a student or staff has taken it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, this is going to be interesting. A stolen portrait? Defense, you're up. Make this quick.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to speak on behalf of all the kids and staff at Lellamy Elementary School, those of whom are upstanding character and moral compass. Never in a million years would any of these dear souls even think of stealing such a precious item.
I can think of a few.
Silence in my court.
Look what you did. My precious baby is upset.
For Pete's sake, this is a court of law, not a daycare. Remove that woman at once. The kid, too. Don't type that, Terry.
My job is to try to type the truth, Your Honor.
The truth? I think you're including some opinions in there. Let me see that record. Judge Blunder unlawfully throws an innocent mother and a crying child out of a courtroom. What a...
Your Honor, what's your language?
Watch your language. Your Honor, watch your language. Since a kid in close range.
The kid's gone. He's... Ow!
I'm so sorry, Your Honor. My baby's just...
Save it. Officer Cooper, arrest this kid.
I can't. I would advise you to escort this kid out. Of course.
No running in court. And don't put that on the record, Terry.
Why not?
Order in the court. Order. Let's get this over with. My line dancing class isn't going to dance itself.
Your Honor, I call Sally Smith to the stand.
1 second. I need to check my highlights. Aren't they just dazzling?
Just like my favorite line dancing partner. Oh, she'll never get a partner before I get there.
Sally, where were you when the portrait of Helen Lemmy disappeared?
Oh my gosh. Did you see my new lip gloss? It's called Princess Sparkle Supreme. I got it for only...
Answer the question.
Fine. I was in the bathroom, obviously. My contour needed serious work. I mean, who would want to steal that portrait anyway? She wasn't even wearing any makeup in it.
So you were in the bathroom during the entire third period?
Duh. Beauty takes time. Unlike that portrait, I mean, she could at least wear some blush. Speaking of blush, should I go more peachy or more pink?
You're 6 years old. Makeup can wait.
Your Honor. Mom, I want to go home.
Your Honor, clearly this witness is too young to steal a portrait and cares too much about makeup to care about anything else.
That's right. Now out of my way. Sephora closes in 3 hours. Mom, Sephora closes in 3 hours. Oh, I forgot something. If you really want to know what I left, I dropped my blush on the floor and I saw the school
offense, call up the next suspect.
I call Emily Gardner to the stand.
According to Section 3, Paragraph 2 of the school handbook, all witness must place their right hand.
Emily, just sit down, please.
Well, according to
Emily, where were you when the portrait disappeared?
Do you want this one? It's okay. Here. Just right there. According to there. Okay.
According to school schedule, page 47, I was in the library, so I could have a way to organize.
Is she always like this, you know? A know-it-all?
Told you so.
Emily, did you take the portrait?
According to
I lost.
According to Rule 15, of the school code of conduct, taking school property is strictly forbidden and punishable by.
Cut them according to my calculations.
Just Brenna, I didn't say according to my calculations. I said according to.
Cut the according to and make your point.
Oh, sorry. What does Terry say?
It's not a speaking line, it's this.
Oh, Terry. Okay.
He did it.
What? Me? But I'm not even on trial.
Then maybe you should be.
I wasn't even on that day. At that time, like ever.
Then where were you?
McDonald's?
McDonald's, huh? That does sound pretty good. I should pick some up before I go to my line dancing class, which is already half over. Come on, let's get a move on, people.
Your Honor, based on the evidence or lack of evidence, and the fact that Emily clearly knows every single school rule in existence, she should not be questioned further.
Valid point.
That was exactly according to him. But I would like to add, I did see Jeffrey and his Goonies carry something in their bunch of garbage trash. Maybe you should call him to the stand. The only reason when I heard them was because of their squeaky shoes.
What are you waiting for? Call up Jeffrey and his Goonies.
All right, just a little sneak peek there.
Great job, guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you.
Thank you, Lemmy Drama Club. That was amazing. My computer is not right. Yeah. Next on our agenda is community comment. Thank you for your interest in Iowa City Community School District and for your willingness to share your comments. You are reminded to give your name, address, and topic on which you plan to speak about. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. Speakers who make comments are reminded that they are responsible for their own statements and may be subject to legal action for those which include hate speech and that are threatening, harassing, or defamatory in nature. It is expected that speakers will address the board and each other with civility and abide by the stated time limits. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting and shall be limited to 4 minutes per speaker and 5 minutes for speakers who has the assistance of an interpreter. Speaker's time limit will be displayed on the screen above Board Secretary Colvin. The initial community comment period shall be limited to 1 hour. Remaining community comment, to the extent necessary, shall take place at the end of the meeting. The board will not engage in any discussion during public comment. The role of the board during this time is to listen. Any individual who does not abide by these rules or otherwise disrupts the meeting may be asked to leave and/or referred to law enforcement. And our first community commenter for tonight is Lisa Schumacher. Please, the microphone.
Got a step stool? Mitch and I went to school together. Saw me always put my backpack on the floor so I could reach the ground. So I'm speaking about the one-to-one technology computers. My background is in disability advocacy and post-secondary education, and I currently work in IT education. So I kind of understand all of the different angles of it, and I have two kids, well, one kid now in the school system, he's a freshman, and my kids personally are doing fine with the one-to-one schools. I'm here on behalf of the kids who don't do so well. And if I was a kid in the school system right now, I would be one of those who can't do one-to-one being on the computer all the time. And in fact, my whole dissertation was handwritten before it was typed because I can't think at the computer. And I know that there's a significant cost differential in buying non-electronic materials, and I understand that funding is hard. But one of the things that I love about that I've experienced with my communities district is that you're really committed to making sure that we meet kids and all students where they are. And that, boy, I'm really nervous, so I'm gonna take a breath. The loss of fine motor skills that I see for kids, with losing their handwriting. My kids cannot read my handwriting. I literally have to write in block prints for them to do their chores and get stuff done. The ability to read emotion and personality in handwriting is like part of learning who we are it's analogous to being able to read body language and vocal patterns, which is critical for communication across the lifespan, right? And like we can't read original historical documents. Like this generation only seeing things in print on the computer and not being able to read historical documents, we know what a huge issue that is right now. So in closing, I may have said this already, but like I said, I'm nervous, so I'm gonna say it again because I like the end of it. I love ICCSD's commitment to holistic education, and a huge component of holistic education is making sure we give our students the ability to learn in ways that meet them where they are so they can be good global citizens. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Ashley Dorn.
Hi, I'm also here on the issue of one-to-one and screens in classrooms. I'm currently the parent of a second grader, and I have been teaching undergraduate classes for the past 10 years at the University of Iowa. Screens and personal computers are a constant in the lives of college students, and in my decade of experience, I have seen students become increasingly dependent on screens and increasingly incapable of the fundamental skills that a college education is meant to build on. I'm here to argue strongly against the use of screens for content delivery and against the use of screens for free time for students in Iowa City Public Schools. When students use screens for content delivery, their comprehension is low, and when they try to learn from screens, their performance is consistently poor. My observations and experience in the classroom have been supported by research that has shown that our ability as people to comprehend and really remember information is best when we're learning from print, speech, and human interaction. My students who print their articles, who read books, and take notes in the margins are always more confident in class, and they are more successful in their assignments. Although my students are comfortable and dependent on computers, I have been surprised at their lack of academic computer skills. They struggle to fulfill formatting requirements for written assignments. Their emails are often poorly written and rude without their realizing it. And they really don't know how to use the library website or the university's many expensive databases. I was a teaching assistant for a class in which students had an assignment to find and read one published research article. It was necessary for me to check on each student individually throughout the process so that they did not fail this assignment. They were not able to conduct library searches, they could not distinguish between types of published sources, and they struggled to read the articles. From what I have seen, when students reach college, they have not learned how to use computers for academic skills. In addition to a poor academic use of computers, I see students struggle with classroom behavior and a lack of stamina for paying attention when they're using screens. I have sat in the back of many lecture halls and watched how students use their time. Most of them bounce around the internet, and I do mean bounce. They do multiple activities on multiple sites. They watch videos, they play games, they check social media, and they shop for cheap shoes during lectures on World War II. Primary and secondary schools offer formative learning experiences, and if students commit to them, they build stamina for paying attention and understanding complex ideas. It is tempting to call this process boring, and it takes practice to resist the temptations of boredom. Screens offer an escape and easier feelings, the easier feelings of being busy and entertained. But feeling busy and entertained does not prepare students for assignments, and when they realize they are unprepared, their confidence plummets, and I watch them flounder. They have spent their time seeking distractions instead of building the study skills that they need to be prepared. Painful as it may be for all of us, boredom is necessary for creativity and for memory. In my 10 years of teaching at the college level, I have seen a direct relationship between student reliance on screens and their loss of comprehension and confidence. Comprehension and confidence are necessary for academic success at all levels. Practice listening and resisting the temptations of boredom start in grade school. Please build stamina and confidence for students with lessons that encourage them to read, imagine, and interact with one another. And please stop the use of screens for free time and the use of screens for content and curriculum delivery in Iowa City Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is David Norpier. Can you?
That's good enough. I think that was excellent. Thank you very much. I'm following up with kind of the same idea, having to do with a one-to-one computer program in the schools. So I have children in the district. My academic background is cellular biology, and for 40 years I've been involved in education. 30 years ago, a group of parents came to me while I was overseeing a basic tech program, and they asked me a very simple question. Why are screens so addictive? They wanted to understand why their children were choosing screens over interacting with others. Over the past 30 years, I've actively followed the research, policies concerning the integration of technology in our schools, and I've watched as educators have debated the issue and as industry has spent more and more and more money on very savvy marketing. I've wondered why there's been such a dearth of information about how screens physically affect children. Tonight, you're voting on funding a program to provide devices to our students. As I've listened to information about the ICCSD program, I see certain topics that are just missing from discussion. Over the past 6 years, I've attempted to address these topics with our administration. I've been met with a complete lack of interest and often silence. I think the following questions need to be answered before we move forward with spending millions of dollars of taxpayer money on screen-based devices that have been shown to provide little to no benefit. We need to choose the right devices, and we need to choose them for the right reason, and we need to use them correctly. Screen use is cumulative. We need to understand how our students are using screens outside of school so that we know how using screens inside of school is impacting them. What happens in school and outside of school, are connected. The questions. Does everybody here understand why screens are addictive? the physical basis of that addiction? If not, I would strongly suggest that you postpone voting on this issue and learn about that. How is digital addiction affecting our students today in our schools? Do we have the ability to assess whether students are or are not addicted and how it's impacting their lives and their choices? What's digital eye strain? A recent American Optometric Association survey found that over 80% of school-aged children 10 to 17 reported feeling symptoms of digital eye strain. These cause discomfort. They lead to skim reading. Skim reading leads to lower comprehension. If professional organizations indicate that our children should be viewing screens from a distance of 25 to 30 inches to minimize digital eye strain, what are we doing giving them Chromebooks and tablets? They can't be 25 to 30 inches away. We're forcing our students to sit closer. We're forcing them to feel this discomfort. It's impacting their ability to comprehend what they're learning. Interestingly, the district is currently supporting active engagement. I keep hearing this word, active versus passive. Well, active engagement is linked to higher degrees of digital eye strain. Last question, why are screens so distracting? What is it about them? Why are we drawn to lights and movement? Students are distracted by their own devices. They're distracted by other students' devices. How do we create an environment in the classroom that's not distracting? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Sandy Hong.
Hello, my name's Sandy Hong, and I am a community pediatrician. I'm speaking today about the one-to-one computer use. And as a physician, it's part of my practice that I address both physical and psychosocial issues with my patients. And I would like the board to vote no to the one-on-one initiative. And the reason is, I have three main reasons. One is it is fiscally unsound and developmentally unsound to give K through fifth graders their own devices. I also feel that device use and small screen use can exacerbate nearsightedness. We call it myopia. And then finally, I think that the issue of anxiety, depression, and lack of social skills is a real thing. Studies have shown that increased use of devices in schools has led to increased social isolation and anxiety and depression. And as a pediatrician, this is something that I've actually seen that has worsened over the last 10 to 15 years. I discuss, I'm always asking patients about how they feel because I care more about them than just their bodies. And a lot of my patients have had issues with anxiety and depression, and numerous families have spoken to me about social isolation, either from cyberbullying or bullying online, or how, because their children choose to spend time on devices, parents don't know what to do when their kids can't form good relationships with their peers. I mean, I have siblings that text each other in the house instead of speaking to each other. And the parents have to get on them about actually communicating face-to-face with their own family members. So this is a real issue, and I really think that you set the tone with school and grade school and learning interactions, and I think everybody here has spoken to you about that too. So really quick, let's go back to why I think it's fiscally and developmentally unsound to give a young child, their own device. I'm gonna use the analogy of driving, okay? When we leave, I'm in agreement that when students leave and graduate from the school district, they should have digital literacy and they should have good digital citizenship. When kids graduate from this district, they also all usually learn how to drive. However, you would never give a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old a car key and a car and say, okay, we're gonna teach you to drive and we're gonna start now. You don't do that. Young children start as passengers in a car and they learn car safety. They learn how to be safe around cars, and eventually, as they grow older and their bodies and their minds learn control, they learn to drive a car, first proctored with somebody else, and then they're able to drive on their own, and they pass tests. I think that computer use and internet use should be the same. Digital literacy is no different. This should be graded approach to teaching kids exposure to computers and the internet. They don't need their own computers to do this. In fact, fiscally, I think it's more sound, instead of giving each child a device, which I think are small and crummy, by the way, is to give them laptops with big, is to not buy laptops, but to actually buy desktops with big screens so that they can sit appropriately at an appropriate distance and learn in a proctored environment. Okay, this is how you do a word search. This is how you do a literature search. And then have printers in those labs where the kids can then get their content and print them off and read them so that they can digest them and learn with them. I think that is fiscally more sound than to give each child their own computer or car, especially at this young developmental age. And then finally, I'm going to talk about the myopia issue. In the United States, it's inconclusive as to whether the rates of myopia or nearsightedness are increasing. But let me tell you, in other countries that have increased their use of digital devices in school, the rate of myopia has skyrocketed. Here in the US, we think it's 30 to 40% of us are nearsighted. But in other
Thank
countries,
you.
it is 85%. We have to think about
Thank
this.
you.
Yes.
Next up is approval for tonight's agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Board Secretary Coburn, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
Secretary Colvin, I'm a yes.
Thank you, Director Abraham.
I'm a yes too.
Thank you, Director Lingo.
I guess I'll say I'm a yes because it's not popping up. Oh, there it is.
Oh, it's here now.
All votes being cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Before we move on to the consent agenda, were there any questions or comments directors wanted to make regarding the bills that were reviewed this cycle?
My questions were answered by email. Thank you.
Okay, hearing none others. Is there any items that directors would like to pull from tonight's consent agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
I move we approve tonight's consent agenda.
Second.
Board Secretary Coburn, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up, we have several public hearings, and the first one is the certified budget for fiscal year 25-26. Vice President Abraham.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the district's proposed certified budget fiscal year 2025-26. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on April 8th, 2025. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on April 12th, 2025. Are there any questions from the board related to the certified budget? Are there any questions from the public related to the certified budget?
Hearing none, I will close that public hearing and move on to the next one, which is the Wood Elementary Preschool Project.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the 2025 Wood Elementary Preschool Project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on April 8th, 2025. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on April 9th, 2025. The district will receive bids on this project at 2 p.m. May 1st, 2025 at the Facilities Management Conference Center, 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on April 9th, 2025. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
Hearing none, I will close that public hearing and move on to our third public hearing, which is the 2025 Coralville Central Elementary School Exterior Hard Surface Project.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the 2025 Coralville Central Elementary Exterior Hard Surface Project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on April 8th, 2025. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on April 9th, 2025. The district will receive bids on this project at 1 p.m. May 1st, 2025 at the Facilities Management Conference Center, 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on April 9th, 2025. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
Hearing none, I will close that public hearing and move on to our final public hearing for the night, which is the 2025 Center for Innovation Hard Surface Improvements.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the 2025 Center for Innovation Exterior Hard Surface Project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on April 8th, 2025. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on April 9th, 2025. The district will receive bids on this project at 2 p.m. April 30th, 2025 at the Facilities Management Conference Center, 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on April 9th, 2025. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
Hearing none, I will close that final public hearing, and we will move on to our next agenda item, which is the Education Committee Report. Director Eastham.
Thank you, President Malone. The Education Committee met last Wednesday? Tuesday, okay, thank you. At Southeast Middle School and heard a marvelous report from the staff at the Southeast about their CASEL instructional program. I'm not going to try to summarize it here, although I would ask if Superintendent Degner or one of the directors might want to make some brief comments about the CASEL program that let the community here tonight know the elements of the program and why it's so innovative and successful.
Thank you, Director Eastham. Put me on the spot here.
Sorry.
But we heard from two different teachers. So CASEL's a 7th and 8th grade program, cross-curricular approach where students are teamed up more so than what they would see in a traditional schedule. So what we learned from them is the fewer transitions was beneficial for their students that work for the environment and their school population. And what we saw was some outstanding showcases of student presentations where they combined social studies, math, science, and language arts into really cool video productions showcasing sustainability. So again, what we saw was an example of what they're doing to benefit the students in their building through a cross-curricular approach.
Thank you. They did have a really great, neat video. It was entertaining and very informative and excellently done, technically wise. And during the presentation, there were some comments to, I think, along the lines that the CASEL program is so far unique to one middle school. There may be some interest on the part of other middle schools to develop something similar. And I was thinking about this today and thought, well, maybe I should push that development, and maybe I should be more quiet and let teachers in the other middle schools do their own innovation and finding ways to connect to students and deliver instruction in a really great way. So I think I'll choose the latter thing and not be so forward and direct. However, there may be board members that have their own ideas about what they would like to talk about in terms of this being at the Educational Committee meeting.
I don't think so. Okay. Thank you, Director Eastham.
Thank you.
Next up, we will move on to policy review, and I will turn it over to Director Williams.
Thank you. So today we had our monthly P&G meeting, and we did the 700 series as well as the policy primers. They're on our first read for the board meeting tonight. We're not voting yet. As usual, a lot of minor changes, nothing super substantive. Although I did learn, and I think it's important we all know this, when Director Eystone caught a lot of our address changes that need to be updated from the ESC to the CFI. But I believe Deputy Superintendent Ramey or Superintendent Degner said that we're still going to refer to it as the Education Service Center. The name ES at the CFI, and so don't be on the lookout. Don't do word searches for just ESC because we're keeping ESC in the policy. It's just going to be at the CFI. I really think the combination of 3 acronyms into 6 is really going to what moves our policy above and beyond other districts, and I'm proud that we're leading in that. There were some, we had a substantive conversation about 704.4, which is the gift policy, and I think the team is going to go back and look at some language, so there may be some changes to that when we see it come back at the board. We also, Deputy Superintendent Ramey did notice or mention, and I think it bears mentioning, 707.5G1 codifies the policy that says if the Appendix 9 is over $2 million, then it will be pulled out separately from Appendix 9. We've been doing that since, I think, last summer, but this puts it in place, puts it in policy, and formalizes that agreement. The policy primers that are attached, nearly all of those changes, again, are either address changes or they are language changes to comply with the new laws passed out of Des Moines. And we had a also nice discussion about some of those changes and the impacts they're going to have. And I don't know, Superintendent Degner, if you wanted to take a moment and kind of address how these policy changes, the practical impact that they'll have in the district.
Yeah, the board specifically talked about the removal of gender identity from the Iowa Civil Rights Code. And, for us in the school district, of course, it's still not permission to treat people poorly, to treat people wrong. And so whether or not that would fall into a protected category in regard to bullying and harassment or a discrimination claim, those are still things we'll continue to work with our leaders and our staff on that aren't acceptable in our schools. They'll never be acceptable in our schools. And so I think that's important for our community to know and hear that while it might not be there, while it might not be able to live in policy, that's still an important aspect for us when we talk about an environment that supports our students and our staff. So we did spend some time conversing about that this evening and made those policy edits and suggestions that were required.
And that's it.
Great. Thank you so much. Next up, we will move on to our presentations for tonight. And the first one is the Fine Arts Study. And I believe Deputy Superintendent Dr. Ramey will be introducing that.
Good evening. Earlier this spring, we engaged OPN to do an assessment of our fine arts facilities, our physical spaces at our 3 comprehensive high schools. And this evening, we are excited to share some of the feedback, information, even recommendations coming out of that work. We're going to do it in 2 parts this evening. We'll have a formal presentation here at the board meeting and then a work session after to get into more of the details around that. And Josh Moe from OPN Architects is here at the podium. Before I do that, I just want to say a quick thank you to all of our fine arts folks from our buildings that have joined us in the audience today. They were engaged throughout the process and really appreciate you all coming here tonight as well. Josh and OPN, no strangers to the district. They designed Borlaug, Alexander, Hoover, and the Penn Elementary addition. So we were really pleased to get to work with them this spring and happy to have Josh here this evening. Josh.
All right. Thank you all very much for having us, and thanks for entrusting us to do this report. I, as an architect, love performing arts spaces, and as a person, love performing arts people. So this was a real joy for me to go through this assessment. I'm not the only one who worked on this. There was a group of us at OPN Architects who collaborated along with some pretty high-hitting consultants. We brought in Threshold Acoustics and Schuler Shook, which are nationally known theatrical designers as well as acoustical designers, to assess these spaces. They've worked on spaces across the country, from K-12 education all the way through some of the most important performing arts spaces in the country. And design engineers who knows many of your buildings very, very, very well. And so this team has worked together on many performing arts spaces together. Also, thanks to the leadership team, they were with us the entire time and steered us in the right direction, because it was there's a lot of content to cover with 3 buildings, a lot of square footage. There is a large report that you guys have been presented with, and we know that we cannot get through that entire report. So my goal tonight is to give you the highest level overview of this report, and to leave a little bit of space for you guys to ask questions at the end. So we're going to talk about what the project goals were, specifically the scope of the project, what we learned, and what some of the recommendations that we we made. Then I understand you guys will have a follow-up work session later to even further digest this information. But know that that big report, it's 100 pages, and then there's 2 appendices. There was, I think, a question already about square footages. Appendix A, all of the square footages, that was actually provided by the school district at the beginning of this. So we started with the square footages and moved from there. This project started for us back in October and November when you guys authorized us to do this assessment. We got your approval and we assembled a group of consultants. We started by getting all of the drawings, so thanks to the school, they've got a great archive system where we went through hundreds of drawings of all of your facilities and all of their additions throughout the years. And then we went on site, and we very intentionally went with the consultant group to look at the spaces before we met with the instructors, so we could have an objective view of what the spaces were that we saw with our own eyes. And then we followed up later after that, meeting with the user groups. And you can see everybody on the left as a participant, about 1/3 from City, 1/3 from West, and 1/3 from Liberty. And we're able to collect survey information from them and really use that conversation time to understand what's really important to them, because there were things that we all agreed in observation that were shortcomings, but then there were other things we learned through those conversations that were pinch points for them that we might not have seen just by looking at the spaces. One thing also to note, we were looking at the spaces, not just what they looked like, but with the lens of how they work technically. We were interested in their code compliance. These buildings were all built at different times. Codes have changed over time. So you have buildings that maybe wouldn't meet current code requirements, but they're fine as is. But the next time you invest, they need to be brought up to code. That's true for accessibility, which is slightly different than building code. We were also looking at just the functionality of the space, the theatrical components. As far as the areas that we studied, we were limited to performing art spaces. So we didn't look at visual art spaces like the art classrooms. And so we did try to touch every single room, not just the big auditorium spaces, but the teaching spaces, the practice rooms, the music libraries, the makeup rooms. We did all of those spaces. Of course, the auditorium is the sort of beating heart of a performing arts space, because the community sees it the most. And this is what the community understands most. And these images, I think, are helpful just to sort of level set an understanding of, you have 3 different buildings, 3 different auditoriums. They're made out of different materials. They had different design aesthetics when they were built. They have different space relationships with other spaces. And they're different, but they're probably the most public-facing parts of these spaces. So if we go into each building, we'll start with City High. City High, of course, is a little bit unique compared to the other schools, not just in its age, but it's a multi-level building, and it's had the most additions and changes over time. This image that you're seeing here on the screen is towards the end of the report, so the sort of analysis and recommendation graphics are you don't want to cut to the punchline in this report, just go all the way towards the end and see this. And you'll see that there are a lot of blue dots for City High on the stage, as well as in the lower level band room. And then there's some blue dots floating around in space, because we know that space constraints are a really big challenge at City High. The things that we saw and heard that were really great about City High, because I don't want this to just be about the shortcomings, where one, the auditorium at City High is gorgeous. The consultant group that we brought in all walked in and said, wow, this is remarkable. This is a really beautiful house, and it's been updated in a really thoughtful and sensitive way over time. The balcony, this is your only school with a balcony. That is a huge benefit to any performing arts spaces. The key for performing arts spaces is to get the audience as close to the stage as possible, and if you can move that back row all the way up and over, people have a much better experience. We also noticed that the upper level rehearsal spaces seemed to sound great when we visited them, and when we talked to the instructors, and the orchestra instructor just loves the space. It works great for them. They also have immediate adjacency to the stage, which is great. That's what you want for big instruments, is you want to be able to take that big instrument from the rehearsal space to the stage. The group that visited the space saw Little Theater as a truly remarkable little gem of a theater. We're really curious to hear more from the instructors, and we learned that it maybe isn't as important to them, but also does not have the technical capacity that would be needed to do some of the things that you want. But this is something that we often hear from schools, is they have the general purpose auditorium that just isn't great for the smaller performances. And if you're in a play that might only have 100 parents that show up, or community members that show up, it doesn't feel great to put that show on in an 800-seat house. So these little theater spaces are something that we hear so often are desirable to schools. So you guys have one, and it's really attractive and nice looking. And then also the campus at City High. I mean, we heard this from people, and we noticed it too. It's a really attractive campus. As far as the things that we saw and heard, though, that really could use investment or time, would be the stage. The City High stage is just too small. It doesn't have appropriate wing size. It doesn't have appropriate depth. There's not space to park some of the big reflecting towers that are necessary for acoustical performance. And the technical capacity of the theater is really, it's old. It needs to be replaced. A lot of the lights are an older style and an older vintage. We also noticed that the lower level band room, we knew the square footage, but when we think about spaces that have to do acoustical things, volume of space is very important. And the volume for the quantity of people in those spaces was just maybe not big enough. And so there's multiple ways to solve that, either smaller bands or bigger spaces, but that space is definitely a challenge. And we heard from the instructors that the support spaces they just need more. They just want more space. And also comparing City to other schools, green room, makeup room, they just weren't really there in City. There's space that's appropriated for that. But there was we heard loud and clear that they just want more space. West High, moving on to West High. West was quite a bit different. They really appreciate the size of their stage. However, their stage amenities were a little bit different. So you'll see a lot of blue dots in the auditorium and not as many in the educational spaces here. So things about West High that were really appreciated would be that big north band room. We were there on a day when no one was there. It was snowing outside. There's a view to this beautiful courtyard. This space is massive. There's adjustable acoustics in it. We heard from the instructors they love it. Like, it's a great space. It certainly causes, I think, tension for other people because they have the really great band room and really good acoustics and really good volumetric space. They also really appreciate the quantity of seats that they have in their auditorium. I think that's the end of that, though, just the quantity of the seats. And the Little Theater. It's a nice space. It's the good is that it's the right size space for those kinds of performances we frequently hear are wanted by other schools. And it seems like it's used by West High. And then the floor plan of City High is also superior in some ways because it's on one level. That same concept of not shipping instruments up and down levels is really beneficial, except the Little Theater, which is a little bit of an outcast because it was built into the original building, and the Performing Arts Wing is of course in a different location. City High's top requests had a lot to do with the stagecraft capacity. West High. West High's rigging capacity is really limited. They have what's called dead hung rigging that really limits their ability to do some things on stage. The lights also were old, and their ability to sort of build sets and get them on stage was kind of limited with the way that it's set up. The house, the seats in West were also something that we observed were both wouldn't meet modern code requirements for both accessibility and egress. Were also just kind of worn out at the end of their life. And when we talk about how wonderful that balcony is at City High, some of the audience experience at the back of West is maybe less than. But again, they love the seat count, so something to consider. And then also just more space. You know, West was really interested in having more rehearsal spaces. That's a premium, what we heard over and over and over again from everyone. Liberty. Liberty is obviously your newest school, so it was interesting to kind of compare the newest school with what you have and have been working with over the years. There's a fewer blue dots for this one for that reason. The thing about Liberty that we heard is having new stuff is nice. Things aren't worn out, they aren't beat up yet, so that's really great. As well as the ease of use, I think, for both the instructors and the students and also the community. There's a real clear logic to Liberty. You just walk in the front door, and whether you're going to a basketball game or you're going to a show, it's all right there on a center entryway, and it just makes sense. We also sort of heard from the instructors that they have enough storage space and things are working pretty well, but they're already kind of getting anxious about growth and how do we what's next maybe. As far as their requests would be, what's next maybe is the stage limitations. They have one stage at Liberty, and they compete for that space on that stage a lot. There's not a second smaller stage for them to use. They also compete with each other for rehearsal and practice room space, which is something that they already would like more of. And then specifically, you'll see the performance music space up there in the right. That wasn't really purpose-built for show choir, but they put show choir in there. And when they have risers in there and they have kids that are really active, it gets pretty hot and pretty sweaty, and it's maybe not the best space for them. And the choir room doesn't work for them to have risers set up all the time, and so break up and set down. That doesn't seem to be working as well for them, that current configuration for choir, show choir, and that performance space. And then also they have a set building area, which is wonderful because unlike City, they have this loading dock and then a set building area and then right next to the stage. But unfortunately, it's a big galley, so there's not a lot of space to do anything. It's arranged appropriately, but they would like more space. So just to recap, West was really focused on the auditorium itself and what improvements in both the house and the theatrical capacity. City High, stage space as well as band rehearsal space, and Liberty space for additional stage space and rehearsal space were the highest requests that we heard, and I'm sure there's more too. I'm going to stop and see if you guys have any questions. I feel like I'm...
Thank you, Josh. I will turn it over to directors to see if anybody has questions right now.
I don't have a question so much, Josh, as a comment. It's really pleasing to me to see that you had a planning group or a review group that included almost all the music staff, the lead music staff from each school that were involved in this review and recommendations.
Thank you very much. The principals of each building arranged that, so thanks to them.
Just a comment, not a question. Thank you so much. I did actually read all 108 pages of the report. It's an incredible report. You can see how much hard work got poured into it. I cannot claim to understand everything, although I appreciate the glossary. That helped a lot to weed through some of that stuff. But no, I think you and your team did just an outstanding, excellent job putting this together for us. It's incredibly comprehensive, and it's going to be a huge assist as we embark on this. So just my thanks.
Thank you so much for this. I also read the entire report, and I tried to understand everything. A little bit out of my comprehension for some of those theater terms, but I think for the safety concerns and the ADA compliance issues alone, I'm very grateful that we decided to go ahead with this assessment. And I do have a couple of just top of mind questions, but I maybe they should wait for the work session. I guess just off the top of my head, I'm wondering about those little theaters and how they're not really used now. I know as a soccer mom, the only time I went to the little theater at West was for soccer meetings. So I'm just really curious if our schools, if our arts personnel believe that they will use those spaces if they're renovated for both West and City. And then also I'm curious about Liberty's band room. I know that, the other schools have 2 and Liberty only has 1. And I know that wasn't on the list as one of their wants, but I was just curious if that had been discussed at all. So those are my top of mind questions. I'm sure I'll have more at the work session.
Sure. I can speak to the band room. It didn't come up as a highest question or concern. I know everyone was being sort of thoughtful and careful, I think, in their requests to sort of say what's top of mind, top of the list. And maybe that is something that's now a concern, but it wasn't something that was brought up. So, however, I'm sure they would love to have one. I think that this sort of space to rehearse was something that we heard, and practice rooms was something that seemed to be really important too. And then as far as the sort of accessibility concerns, as sort of your first part of your question, one thing to keep in mind is that with these spaces, you just assume that they were appropriately permitted when they were built, and it's okay. But yeah, moving in the right direction. If you start touching it, is when you need to update what you need to do. So what you need to do to bring it up to code compliance. So
Thank you. Yep.
Just have a general question for Mr. Mel. Will you or will you not be attending the next meeting? So I just want to make sure that if we have questions for architects, whether we ask them now or if he will be around later to ask him, because if he's leaving to go home, we should probably ask him now.
Yeah, I would ask him now, Director Lingo. We had not asked him to stay for the work session portion tonight. So if you have questions specific to the architects, you can ask him now. If something comes up later, Josh has been great about jumping on calls with us and things too. And so I'm sure we could do some follow-up if we're not able to answer it later.
My main question is, so when I look at a lot of because I live in the neighborhood and I hear from people that I surround myself with more often than not, and they are City High people. When I look at Olmsted Auditorium, I mean, it has 20% or more fewer seats than the other 2 high schools. The stage is at least 33% smaller than the other high schools. Is it possible to extend that stage without ruining, well, I don't even know if ruining would be the correct word, but I mean, it could dramatically affect acoustics. Like, is that possible, or?
Yeah, I think that, there's 2 parts to Olmsted Auditorium. There's the actual house where people sit in it. And I think the report mentions that there's been a dramatic reduction in seat count in that space. And that's because the values have always been to create a better experience for the audience. So seats get wider as people get wider, seats get further apart as people's legs get longer. And we also, over the years, seats were lost to add ramps and stairs to make it more accessible. Another feature of City High that is sort of unique is that the apron of the stage, which is the zone beyond the proscenium arch, is really, really deep. And that's probably a function of a way too small stage. Like, they're just trying to grab as much space as they can. The house, you can add some seats, and we actually did a study to see how many seats you could add and still maintain a good experience. And it's certainly possible to add some seats. The stage is, if you wanted to make that 3 times larger, you can all imagine it kind of needs to be exactly in the same spot it is, but bigger. And so that's a pretty substantial undertaking, but it can absolutely be done, and you can maintain the acoustic integrity of the space. And when designing a new stage space, we would make them symmetrical, but there's all kinds of opportunities to have much larger wing space on one side than the other. So that would be a pretty robust design process to understand how one would reconstruct a stage in its current space, if that was a direction that you guys wanted to go. Additionally, if you guys wanted to add seats to the auditorium, I do think that's a possibility. I don't know that you're going to get all the way to 850 that West has, if that's the goal. Little connected piece. One thing about West is your largest auditorium is if you do invest in that theater and you start to add accessible seating and you start to add appropriate egress aisles and you start to make more comfortable seats, you will see the seat count go down in that auditorium. So you might be working in two different directions at the same time, if that's the direction you guys choose to go.
And for Superintendent Degner, we have lights and sound upgrades for City High already that are sitting in storage somewhere. Correct or incorrect?
Yeah, we had some upgrades that we paused when we commissioned this report, since we knew we would be looking at some potential more upgrades, and so we held on a couple of those projects you're referencing, Director Lingo.
Okay, thank you.
Doesn't look like there's any additional questions, so thank you so much for the work and coming to present to us tonight.
Thank you.
Next up is our presentation on the preschool update. Is that Executive Director Proctor?
All right, so we have Eliza and Christy Utley here tonight that are going to provide you an update about some of our preschool programming. And have been supportive of this effort for us to continue to scale up and scale out our preschool program across the district, and with a special emphasis on full-day programming. So excited to have them here tonight to update you guys on our progress.
Yeah, thank you, Superintendent Degner. Yeah, Christy and I are super excited to be able to provide you an update. As you're aware, we embarked on a new pilot this year offering more expansive full-day programmings and preschool at every single one of our elementaries. And so we wanted to provide you with an update on how that's going and what it's going to look like for next year.
For me, it's braver about everything what we do. I like giving my teachers a hug. My teacher did really funny stuff. My teachers make me happy. My favorite learning about ABCs. I would say like blocks. I like reading. Writing everything that I can write. Once I grow up, I want to be a brother. I want to be a fighter. A doctor who delivers babies. A horsey. Yes! One thing I want to be, I think I'm going to be on the 10th floor of the Children's Hospital. I'm going to be a doctor. I want to be a dentist. Teach people. A transformer. I would just help Mom. One thing I want to do is to help somebody. Building things and learning things. Went to different places.
All right, that right there, now you guys can watch me try to get back to the presentation. There we go. That right there was the fantastic work of Kristen Peterson and her team as we continued to market what we were offering in preschool this year. And what you'll see over the course of the next few slides is the success that we've seen in our full-day pilot and our full-day programming. And a lot of that has to do with the increased marketing of Kristen and her team. So we owe her a huge thank you.
for helping us continue to push this work forward. And those kids are absolutely adorable and are the ones that our teachers and our staff here at ICCSD get the pleasure of working with every day. So today we will talk about our current pilot, the expansion that we have seen, that we're experiencing for next year, and then what our registration numbers are looking like and trends over time. So our current pilot this year was around full-day preschools. We have six different sites. They are at Weber, Grant, Lemmy, Horn, Alexander, and Twain. Alexander and Twain are the two buildings that house our current Shared Visions preschool programs, and those have been a part of our ICCSD for several years. The one at Alexander was previously housed at Hills, and that moved over to Alexander this year. But at Weber, Grant, Lemmy, and Horn, those were additions that just started this fall. We currently have 110 students enrolled in our full day, and so they are full with waiting lists that we had worked on all throughout the year. And Christy and her team do a fantastic job of monitoring that waiting list and getting kids in as soon as we possibly can. We have 545 students enrolled in half day. As you're aware, our statewide voluntary preschool program half day is free, and so we still do have 545 students that are in that, totaling 655 students in preschool. You'll see on a slide later kind of where we've trended in preschool and are super excited about that number of kids that we're able to serve in our system. We currently have 558 4-year-olds, 97 3-year-olds within our system. A majority of our 3-year-olds do come to us from early access that have IEPs, and so we're excited to be able to serve them. And sometimes we do get the opportunity to work with them in the preschool setting for 3 years, and so that's really a great start for our kids. We have 615 students that receive free preschool. And then you can see our tuition numbers that are down there at the bottom. 3-year-olds that do not have an IEP that come to us, they do pay tuition, as well as the 33 4-year-olds that are in that full day, they pay part of the tuition. Shared Visions, a majority of those students do not pay tuition as a part of that program. And then other students were on scholarships because they qualify for free or reduced lunch. The other day, we had the wonderful opportunity to go over to Horn, and you were able to see that preschool program that is funded through a private donor that we are very fortunate to have that's funding preschool for a lot of our students here in Iowa City. Go ahead.
Okay. Looking at the success measures from this year, my voice doesn't carry very well. We have tripled our full-day classroom enrollment this year. We went from 34 students last year to 110 full-day students. We have full-day classrooms that give us 2.5 more hours of learning time each day as compared to the half-day program options. And then some of the data that we've looked at throughout this year is our GOLD assessment data, which is our required assessment through the state. And we collect 3 checkpoints per year. We also have collected anecdotal information from teachers and from parents. And then next year, we plan on looking at our fall and winter screening data to support whether or not full-day options are continuing to increase our student achievement. So here's what the data looks like. For our fall to winter gold growth data, 90 to 100% of our 4-year-old full-day students are meeting gold kindergarten readiness expectations in all 6 domains, and they should be meeting those at the end of the school year. Our half-day programs, we're still at 82 to 89% of our students achieving that kindergarten readiness expectation, measuring their growth from fall to winter and then to spring. Our glows that we have are anecdotal information from teachers. So the strengths that we have are that we are giving students more time in the classroom, which increases language and functional skills, foundational skills. We're able to have more large and small group activities and instructional activities.
We're able to see a stronger connections with our students in their classrooms, in their buildings. Some areas where we need to grow are, we need to give teachers more consistent planning time. We need to also give our students time outside of the classroom in other parts of the building, such as the gym or the multipurpose room. Our preschool students do not receive specials, and so that's the reason why we would like to give them more time outside of the classroom, because they're in the classroom all day. And that also leads to our first concern about planning time and giving consistent planning time for our teachers. And providing consistent para support is also a growth area.
One piece to note on the specials is with licensure, in order to teach preschoolers, they have to have that early childhood license. So our special teachers are K-6 or a lot of times K-12, and so that's just kind of a constraint. But what we're working on as a part of the pilot this year is just different ways to target those 3 growth areas and feel confident that we'll be able to tackle those by fall.
Absolutely. Parents have given us feedback as well. Our glow areas are that they're happy to see their child attend their home school. Teachers are providing great communication. Preschoolers are able to attend the same school as their siblings, and they feel that their child is better prepared for kindergarten. And some of our growth areas are parents would like to see students have a breakfast option. They would like to see experience in specials classes. Again, like Eliza said, this is something we're working with. Arrival times could be more consistent with our kindergarten through 5th grade students, and consistent para support for our students with IEPs. Now, additional data from a survey that we gave parents, 81% of our parents are satisfied with the full day option as compared to the half day. 92% agree with the balance of activities that are provided in preschool. 96% feel as though their students are developing foundational academic skills needed for kindergarten. 96% believe that their child has increased independence, incredibly important for preschoolers. 100% of our parents feel like their overall satisfaction with the program is good. 100% agree that preschool is providing a safe and nurturing environment. 92% are satisfied with the length of the school day. 100% feel as though their students are developing positive peer relationships. And 96% believe that their child's individual needs are being met by the Iowa City preschool programs.
All right, so what's next for us as we embark upon the 25-26 school year? So this year was new that we're offering preschool at every single one of our buildings, and so in the fall we are excited to share that we will be offering full day options for at every single one of our elementary centers. This data is as of the 16th, because we are constantly monitoring, and as if you're not aware, preschool enrollments continue to come in every single day. We get them every day this spring. We'll get a big boost here in the summer, and then we still do get them all throughout the school year. And so what we're sharing is what we have planned as of last Thursday. So our total number of full day sections that we're planning at this point to offer next year is 23. So that is at least 1 at every building, with 2 full days at Lucas, Horn, and Alexander. And those are all based off of registrations and where families were saying that they wanted their children to go, or that is most of the time their designated home attendance area. We have 12 a.m. sections and 7 p.m. sections planned for the fall based off of where families were registering. We do have quite a few 3-year-olds that have applications in, and we do plan to expand our offerings for 3-year-olds. We just need to make sure we get all of our 4s placed and assigned into their buildings before we start to accept those 3-year-olds, but are excited that they're wanting to have their children start with us at that age here in ICCSD. Which will require us to have a couple construction projects. There was just one on the agenda this evening for wood, and I believe the last meeting we shared about Penn, but there will also be some projects at Coralville Central and Kirkwood in the coming future in order to have those 2 designated spaces in preschools. If you were, again, on that visit at Horn, those are some of our model classrooms that we're trying to replicate a lot of those components that are in that really vibrant and fun and engaging learning environment for our kiddos. For buildings that are going to be having those new classrooms, they'll have new furniture, new equipment, and resources at those sites. And then we are super excited that 11 buildings will be offering after-school programming for our 4-year-olds that will extend past the school day. All of our buildings have before and after-school programs, and we asked for them to work with their partner, whoever is the interagency that they work with, to think about 4-year-olds for next year and who felt like they could do that reasonably within their program. We had 11 that said they were ready to try that for next year, with the expectation that everybody offers the extended care in the 26-27 school year. Got that date right. So this is where we are at with registration and enrollment. So these are our trends over time. You can see the light blue are the full day offerings, and in 22, 23, 23, 24, those 2 school years, those would have been just with the shared visions programs at Twain and at Hills. And then you're going to just see our overall enrollment in the kids that we are serving at 655, which is the highest it's ever been. And that is with those full days expanding in those 6 areas, those 4 additional on top of the 2 shared visions. And as of April 16th, we had 530 students that had already enrolled and registered with us for next year. And you can see that drastic increase in the number of full day families. And so we're really excited about what is being offered, what we're able to be able to provide at all the schools. Our principals are currently hiring and interviewing candidates. We've got some really great ones that we're super excited about already that will be joining us in the fall, and are just really optimistic about our preschool program, and are excited that our kids' needs are being met. We're able to build those relationships even stronger and earlier. One piece of feedback that we actually got the other day after kindergarten roundup was a lot of parents were saying, I don't know if we need to do this anymore because I already feel so connected to the school. So maybe we should do preschool roundup instead of kindergarten roundup. And it just was like, I wasn't thinking about that. And so I think people are just feeling more connected to their schools and are excited to be able to be part of ICCSD. So any questions that you have about preschool?
Thank you for the presentation, and I'll open it up for directors if they have questions or comments.
2 questions. Does our 530 count include the 3-year-olds, or does it exclude them since they haven't been?
It does not. And actually, I just looked at numbers before I came over, and we're already at 542. That's how.
So that's how quickly things change. So that's our moving target all the time on where we're adding sections.
We were approximately 50 applications for 3-year-olds.
Okay. And then my other question was about the 3-year-olds. I noticed that we do apparently have tuition based for 3-year-olds. Is that any 3-year-old? Like no IEP requirement, just
Correct.
anybody who's a 3-year-old can come to preschool if we have space on a tuition basis?
Yes.
And is that tuition model slightly different than the 4-year-old tuition model?
It's half.
It's half of what, yes, it's that half of that tuition because we don't receive any state funding for 3-year-olds.
That's what it would be more than a family of
Yeah,
a 4-year-old
so
would pay.
$375. So our 3-year-old students, we allow to come into a half-day program rather than the full-day program. So that's the cost is half for that. So they can come in AM or PM.
Okay, so no full day 3-year-old preschool, but we do have a half day for any member of the community who's interested with a 3-year-old.
At this time. I think what we've got to continue to look at over time is if we have space and if families want their children to go full day, those would be discussions that we need to continue to look at. Right now, we are taking those enrollments for 4s and really trying to prioritize that. And as Christy mentioned, those enrollments are coming in quickly. And so really kind of making sure that we're meeting those 4-year-olds' needs, and then we'll take the 3s as soon as we possibly can. Our goal is to do that before the beginning of the year, whereas traditionally it's been October, which by then a lot of families already have solidified what their care looks like. And so we do want to be able to do that earlier, which has been really helpful to get these numbers and to get kids enrolled as soon as we can. Good questions, thank you.
This is just a heartwarming report.
Thank you.
I remember maybe a year or more ago, when we looked at the data of the effect on kindergarten assessments of kids who have been to preschool and kids who have not been to preschool. And this is a commendable thing for you to be doing, to make that assessment advantage available to many more, and eventually we hope to all students in the district. So I really appreciate your work.
Thank you.
I appreciate your work and the program itself, but I have a couple financial questions on the program, so I don't know if it'll be directed to you, Superintendent Dagner, or CFO Kurth. So.
We'll take it as a team.
Okay. You know, given that we only receive funding for half-day pre-K from the state, and I know that we have some pretty small classrooms across the district in the pre-K program. Where does the money come from to shore up, let's say, if there's 8 children? I don't know what the smallest classroom is, but your smallest classroom to fund the teachers, or does it come out of the rest of the general fund, or how do we finance that?
Yeah, we just discussed this. So Adam, if you want to go ahead and talk about those pieces.
Yeah, so there are a couple different funding sources. One of them is, as you mentioned, the state amount that is allocated, the 1/2 per preschooler. We also receive tuition for tuition-paying families. And then we also receive funding for special education students with IEPs who are enrolled in our programming. We seek other funding as well. So for example, this current year, we have, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the grant. Shared Visions, thank you very much. So we have Shared Visions in place at a couple schools. We've been waiting very patiently for the state to open that application, which was supposed to be open in the fall. We plan to apply for that and also to seek other funding sources. But at this point, we have not used general fund dollars to pay for preschool. It's all coming out of preschool funds or then those tuition dollars or other sources. We do have a balance in our preschool fund that's really designed to, especially as we grow the program and scale it up a little bit, to address any of those situations where we might have a situation where in 1 year our revenues would not exceed our expenditures. But to this point, we've been in a position where they do.
Thank you. The next question is with the extension of before and after school programs to 4-year-olds, that means that they have to change ratios. Am I correct in that? In their staffing ratios. One thing that I would like I would like the administration to take note of is any sort of increased prices before and after school program to get those ratios, because it's my family, we can afford it, but I know that a lot of families, it's very hard to afford the cost already. And given the times that we're in, I think we should really monitor how the added expenses.
There's a possibility of a future grant through the state that we've been watching very closely and hoping that that will help. It's called the Continuum of Care Grant. The state has put it on hold this year because it's just happening so fast and our grants aren't even out yet. But we do want to explore that because I think that could help. Given the guidelines from the state, whatever those may be, I think that will help us to fund some of those before and after school care programs because the ratios do go down by a couple of students. So we want to be mindful of that as well.
So that was another piece that our BASPs were exploring, which is why, you don't see all 20 of our attendance areas. Some looked at their current staffing and said, we're good to go with those new ratios based off of what our current staffing already is, and felt confident that at the point they were with their budget that they were able to maintain that.
I just want to thank district level admin, including the two of you, for seeking out those grants and being active to help families. So thank you.
Thank you.
I only had one question, and it was regarding breakfast being available for our preschoolers. Is there a way to make that happen? I mean, I know we have a separate nutrition budget. They come at $7.55.
Yep. I just contacted our nutrition services director the other day because this question came up. And so a few of our buildings receive breakfast across the building. And so we plan to give students in those buildings breakfast next year too.
Great.
And some already do.
Okay.
Go to get breakfast. I think that we just were including all of the information. I think there was some misunderstanding of who could access breakfast as well. We don't serve it in the preschool. However, they do have access to getting it in the lunchrooms. And some go ahead and looking at Ashley, because we have a lot of preschools at Lemmy that like to go there without telling the grown-ups that that's what they were going to do, and had a surprise when they had a lunch bill. So some of them tried to take advantage of that.
Another thing that we offer in preschool is a snack every day. So even our half-day students get a snack, and our half-day is just a couple of hours, just a few hours. So they do get food when they're coming in, but it would be nice to have that breakfast option too.
And just one final piece, we get to be the ones that are up here sharing about, the success of this. I will also just super grateful that we have been afforded the FTE to last year have a preschool administrator and this year have Christy in the preschool coordinator role. Like this would not have been possible if it was just left to myself to be able to complete it, or just our team. And so just super grateful that we were afforded that extra FTE, and we have seen just the return on that already. And so just are really excited about the future of preschool and the future for our district. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before we move on to the next presentation, I want to go backwards to the fine art study just really quickly and thank our building administration and staff they're sitting with us, and it's pretty warm in this room, so that's why I forgot to add it to the presentation. But thank you so much for the work that you did with the consultant that we hired and for being here with us tonight. Next up is the device deployment.
Yeah, so I'm just going to do a little brief intro. So at last week's Ed Committee meeting, Director Eastham had mentioned we did a presentation on CASEL, and the board received this presentation about one-to-one device deployment and kind of the journey that our district technology committee worked through this year. And so we have Patrick Snyder with us here tonight. Andrew Fenstemaker was not able to join us this evening, but he was also a big part of this work and responsible for delivering that presentation last week. Tonight, we've asked Patrick to hit the highlights since the board has already received this presentation. There was a few videos, of course, you watched last week that we will not play this week, but we wanted a chance for the public to receive the presentation, and then also just ask the board if there's any follow-up questions since we had some Q&A dialogue last week that maybe wasn't as extensive as it could have been with the time we were kind of buttoned up against there at the end of the evening. So, and then following that, of course, you're going to have action items around the student Chromebook purchase, the staff-assigned student lab device, and staff and student Mac device. And so we wanted to deliver the overall plan before, of course, we asked you to consider those items. So with that, I'll turn it over to Patrick here.
All right, thank you for having me. I'm appreciative of that and thankful to share the work of our district tech committee. That includes family members, teachers, teacher librarians, administrators, community members, and we even had some students on the committee as well. So that was super fun for us. Just like we were mentioning, we're going to hit the highlights of it, and some of the timeline context behind this is back in October through December when we first started meeting, we started talking about what our ideal experiences would be in classrooms. Not necessarily around technology, not necessarily around devices, but what is good, high quality teaching and learning look and sound and feel like. That ultimately led to some recommendations, and so since then we've been creating and refining some different recommendations and doing surveys and creating a lot of extra data points to help inform our decisions. And within that, our tech committee also identified some 1, 2, and 4 year plans of what instructional technology can look and sound and feel like with our students and our staff. And so this spring we've been kind of solidifying those, and ultimately we're here today to summarize some of those findings. We did have a really cool video. It was not nearly as fun as all those cute preschoolers, and Andrew and I are not nearly as adorable, so we're not going to watch that one.
As our current student,
so you don't have to deal with that. But our journey. So, like I mentioned in a little bit of that context, like our meeting number 1 was identifying our current reality along with what are our perspectives on our ideal learning experiences, and that ultimately led to us refining and evaluating and creating some rubrics around not only our portrait of a graduate, but our national EdTech report that centers around learning design, student engagement, access and equity, and digital literacy. So with that national EdTech design and our portrait of a graduate, aligned with what we were, our ideal learning experiences were, that kind of really developed some 1, 2, and 4 year plans. It wasn't really until meeting number 3 that we really started talking about device recommendations and deployment and what those would look like. When we did start surveying family members and staff members and communities, we started talking about what device type we would want, what the allocation would look like, and where those locations would be. And so we divided that into grade level bands of K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12. So initially we started with our tech committee, and we'll just kind of talk about the device recommendation with K2. Overwhelmingly was Chromebooks, and you'll see some of the response rates change, and that's just because the way the form was developed, like if you answered one way, then it kind of cut you off from the rest of the survey. So you might see some response rate changes up there. So K2 was Chromebooks. Device allocation, it was a little bit more split. 50% was 1-to-1, and a little bit more of a chunk of like a shared cart within a common space for a grade level. So kindergarten might have a cart of Chromebooks, or first grade might have a cart of Chromebooks. But 1-to-1 was still the overwhelming majority there. And then the location would be stay at school for our K2 students, is the recommendation from the tech committee there. Moving to 3-5, again, Chromebooks, and you can see the response rates fluctuate just a little bit. 75% was 1-to-1 with a little bit of push for one shared cart for each grade level. And then again, the location was to stay at school. 6-8, Chromebooks, 1-to-1, and take home. So when we got to that middle school model, it was more take home and a little bit of stay at school. And then 9-12 really didn't deviate very much. Chromebooks, and there were some different passions with the device type. Some of the members of our tech committee were students, and they had like some really high quality technology that they were working with. So that was their input. And so 1-to-1 and take home with a little tiny bit of stay at school. So with all of that, with the tech committee and surveying with the tech committee, the biggest deviation was our K5 model. And so we needed to gather some more information from teachers and from parents and guardians and families because our current model is take home, and the recommendation was stay at school. So we surveyed some teachers, and we didn't get a response from every single teacher in the district, but we did get responses from every elementary building or elementary school. And again, the device type was Chromebook, 1-to-1 with some push for shared, and largely stay at school. With our 3-5, again, Chromebook, 1-to-1, and a little bit more of take home when needed. So largely stay at school, but a little bit more of take home when needed. And then so that led us to our family data with K2. And so our blue is kindergarten, our red is first grade, and our yellow is second grade. And so the large majority was a 1-to-1 environment by grade. And then the large majority was be taken home when needed or upon parent request, with also staying at school. And then 3-5, similar 1-to-1 for 3-5, and then take it home when parent requests or when it's needed, and then also stay at school was a little bit more of a push there. That all led to some additional wonderings as we presented this data with our whole tech committee, there were some additional wonderings from middle school, and so we did some extra middle school focus groups where Andrew and I were able to jump over to Southeast and North Central and Northwest and actually do some of this work with them. And so that led us to an activity called a Gripe Jam, where they were able to write everything that was annoying to us so that we could gripe about with instructional technology and 1-to-1 device deployments. And so we were able to really have some themes emerge and really, really listen to what their lived experience every day in school is like. And so that process goes through writing on stickies, and then we sort them from least frustrating to most frustrating, and then we organize them again by the least amount of people impacted to the most amount of people impacted. So we're able to kind of really categorize that and then really identify what are the most pressing issues in our middle school model. And so the themes that emerged from surveying and interacting with our middle school teachers was we need to enhance device readiness and access, strengthen digital literacy, clarify our expectations, and equip and empower our teachers. Ultimately, that kind of leads us to device recommendations, where in the middle school model, they prefer the Chromebook. And again, this is middle school again. They want one-to-one. And then we did see a little bit more of a split of stay at school or take home when needed. And so there were some more discussions that emerged from that of like, what could that look like and some logistics behind that. That ultimately leads this to, in K-5, we have an opt-in model right now, or we're thinking of the opt-in model where a family could go through a process that's still being kind of determined of they could request that a Chromebook come home with their student, but we would opt for one-to-one Chromebooks for K-5 in Carts for Classrooms. In grades 6 through 8, it's a current method that we have right now, except for we're exploring at Southeast how maybe 6th graders could possibly keep Chromebooks at school. And so there's some ongoing discussions about what that could look and sound and feel like in the 6th grade model at Southeast. And Southeast was kind of chosen because they had some desire to pursue that. And it's a really big section, so the scalability of it was appropriate in that case. And then in grades 9 through 12, again, it's same as our current model. So with all of that, I know I spoke really quickly, but we were trying to hit the highlights. With that, the tech department has used this information to procure bids that you'll be able to vote on. So I'm here to try to walk through any of those slides or try to process any of that information.
Thank you so much for that, and I will open it up to directors for questions or comments.
I just have one quick clarifying question. For the K-5 carts, each student will still, it's still a one-to-one, so each student will still have a Chrome. There won't be a cart that gets pushed around the room, the classrooms.
Correct.
But
Each
then,
student, yep.
But then it's like a bookshelf, but it's a cart shelf, and
Yes.
the computers live there.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank
Yep.
you.
I hope that answers it. Yeah, they would still have their own device, but to take those home, the family would opt into that process.
I really appreciate all the data you gathered, and the second time through, I caught more things than I got the first time through, so thank you. It's so important to talk to the teachers and talk to the families. I don't know, do we talk about talking to students about what they, I guess students were on the original tech, the original group, yeah.
We've had some students on the original tech committee group that are still showing up to our tech committee meetings. And
Okay,
so
good.
they've been very open about their experience in schools and what they themselves have experienced, but also what they experience with the teacher lens of it from their best viewpoints and what their peers experience as well. So they've been absolutely outstanding and instrumental in this process.
Yeah, I appreciate that you've heard their voice.
Yeah, well, it's been really valuable.
Thank you, Patrick, for the presentation. I appreciate some of the changes that are being made, the opt-in change for the K through 5 and the pilot that for the 6th graders at Southeast. I think that's going to be interesting. I do want to be responsive to the community commenters tonight and some of the emails that we've received and phone calls. I think, when multiple pediatricians approach you with concerns, it gets my attention, and I think you may not be the person to answer some of these concerns, and this may need to be something that we look at down the road in some additional board meetings. But I am curious about some of these concerns that have been raised about the eye strain and whether or not we are, instructing our students to keep that screen 24 inches, I guess, is the recommended amount. What the parameters are for the time during the day. I understand that the parents can keep track of that on securely, but I do wonder what sort of training the teachers have received on the ed tech and how much time they're allotting for their classroom time for screen time, if they're allowing the students to use it, for free time, and, if they're teaching these academic skills that were brought up. It's been kind of brought to my attention that reading on the Chromebook is probably not a good idea. However, things like keyboarding or internet searches, those types of things, that would be appropriate. And so, I guess at some point, I would like for our board to kind of look at more detail into those concerns, because when I look at the data here, the number of parents and teachers on the committee that said no Chromebooks, it wasn't zero, right? It was somewhere between 18% to 10%, and only 50% said they wanted the one-to-one. So I think, I have concerns for all grade levels, but I'm particularly concerned about that K through 2 level. So I don't know, Superintendent, do you want to weigh in on some of these issues?
Yeah, I think those are valuable questions. I mean, I think that we're all concerned about screen time, right? I mean, that's been something that this board and I think our district has talked about since the fall when we talked about cell phones. So I think, of course, we want to be responsive to that. I think one thing that's caught some wind, and I think, we have a responsibility to look into, and I'm going to have Adam share some data with you here in a second, is I think there's an assumption that, kids are maybe on devices more than they are at school, and that's not our experience from being in buildings, or probably what our principals or what our students are sharing back with us. And so we've tried to work to kind of quantify that in the last week or so. And so I'm going to ask Adam to kind of share some minutes per day on what we have there, because I think that, of course, there's probably some examples where there'll be outliers to this situation, but I think it also is kind of a level setter for us on this conversation about what kind of screen time kids are involved with. And then that helps inform some of our next steps. But I think those are all reasonable things and things we need to be considering, and especially as we've had a lot of conversation about that this school year. So Adam, can you just share some of that data we were able to pull and explain how we were able to capture that data?
Yeah, absolutely. So we use Clever as a system that we use for student logins, and we also use for authentication to educational apps, but it installs a client on the Chromebook and actually allows us to track utilization as well. And so we can tell when students are using the Chromebook, what they're using it for, and quantify that over a period of time. And so I actually pulled data from actually the most recent 28 days ending yesterday. So that doesn't overlap any big school breaks that started after spring break. And so that should be fairly representative. And what we see is that across the district, if you look at all calendar days, our typical student uses their Chromebook for 26.99 minutes per day. That's including weekends, but we also see lower utilization on weekends. So the chart is always up, 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 and then down for the 2 weekend days. So if we just were to divide that by school days, it works out to 41.98 minutes is what we see in terms of utilization. That's across the district. That does vary by level. So when we look at the elementary level, for example, that drops to 24.73 minutes, whereas the highest then is at the high school level at 47.43. And so we can see, one of the things I guess that I would share is, in my previous role as director of technology, and actually in my current role, I've visited dozens and dozens of schools all around the country. And I frequently walk into schools where you see students with Chromebooks out most of the time when you walk into a classroom. And I think that there are some schools that have approached it as, this is a big investment. We need to get our money's worth out of the investment. And so we have an expectation of use. And, that's something that you do see. That's something that's never been in place here in Iowa City. We've never told teachers, it'd be interesting to hear from Lucas and Eliza on this. We've never told teachers, you have to use Chromebooks for X number of minutes per day. We expect that when we walk into a room, we'll see Chromebooks. And so here, I think my experience has been when I walk into one of our classrooms, having, a lot of students with devices out is the exception, and the numbers back that up. They're not using those for nearly most of the day, and the numbers I gave you include out of school use as well. That's simply all use of the devices on average. When we look at top apps, I just pulled the way the reporting system works, and I was doing this today. So I had to compile some of this by hand. But I did poll just kind of randomly one high school, one middle school, one elementary. At West High School, the top 8 apps, the number 1, 2, and 3, number 1 was Google Suite, 19 minutes a day. Number 2 was Canvas, 10.7. Number 3 was YouTube, 9.78. So that was our West High average over the last 28 days. Looking at Southeast Middle School, number 1 was YouTube, 11.6. Number 2 was Google Suite, 11.32. Number 3 was Canvas, 5.01. So it's the exact same 3 apps that were most heavily used. Elementary is different. We use the devices differently at the elementary level. The number 1 app in use was Happy Numbers, 4.8 minutes per day. Number 2 was Scratch, also 4.8 minutes per day. And then number 3 was Lexia Core 5, 4.62. So we're not seeing huge volumes of utilization of those. I will say that all 3 of those apps were used by a large majority of students at some point in the last 28 days. So it was 90+%, but not for huge amounts of time.
And then just a follow-up question. I don't know, Adam, if you're the one to answer this, but do we provide training for the teachers, in terms of curriculum delivery? And are there paper-based alternatives for the students that are experiencing eye strain?
So in terms of professional learning, a lot of the learning is around effective use of the curricular materials. Our teacher librarians do a fantastic job of doing digital citizenship and digital literacy lessons. But in terms of like the appropriate distance between eyes and the screen, we have not done that yet, but can certainly explore. And then will you repeat your second question, Director Finch?
The paper-based alternatives for those experiencing eye strain.
Yes, we do have some options for that. Most of the time teachers get creative, and so they'll just type out on their computer and then print out things that they need. In terms of like those 3 sites that Adam had talked about, Scratch and Lexia and Happy Numbers, those are adaptive-based educational applications, and so those would be hard to replicate on paper. However, for students that are experiencing eye strain, there could be some additional activity that they would do that's just not as interactive or adaptive as those programs provide in the elementary.
And to echo some of that, from an elementary curriculum standpoint, like Lexia is something that complements our early ELA foundational skills, and within those experiences, there are options for teachers to print things out that are adapted to what the standards are and what the data is saying the kids might need. So there is some option, but to your point, which I really appreciate, there's an opportunity for some additional learning around that and additional balance in what we do in classrooms. And I think that goes around back to what our tech committee goals would be with what does learning design look like in all of our grades, but especially in K2, our primary grades, and what does student engagement look like there too. So there's additional growth to be made.
I'd like to thank Director Lynch for bringing this up. It's something I'm interested in as well, especially after hearing all the comments we've heard. I know we formed a study group, Superintendent Degner, for the cell phone question, and I wondered if the board would be interested in developing some kind of a similar approach to looking at screen use in instructional efforts at a little bit more comprehensive and leisurely pace, perhaps. I'm well aware that the staff is engaged in a number of major efforts right now, so I'm not sure how this would work out in terms of timing, but it's something that, at least in my mind, could be done within the next very few months. I would give myself away here a little bit. I'm not inclined to change our recommendations about renewing our one-on-one deployment as it's been outlined to us so far tonight. But I think looking at screen time and in instructional delivery is something that could be done fairly thoroughly and credibly.
I think the message I would encourage the board to receive with this is your teachers are doing a great job in the classroom with cell phones and with screen time use. When we looked at the data, I actually wish we had pulled that sooner to inform some of this conversation, because I think there's a little bit of conversation that's gotten away from us about how much screen time is happening in the classroom versus what actually the data shows us. And so I think the thing, that we of course want to be responsive to and that we want to pay attention to is, of course, screen time use. And we know that the ties to some of the mental health pieces that we heard from commenters tonight and that we've studied ourselves this fall. But overall, our staff are doing the right things for kids when you look at that data. And of course, I'm again sure there's some days where that's higher and there's some days where it's lower and they're probably not used at all. But when we look at the numbers, I think it's something we can continue to study and look at. But I would also just consider the resources we put behind a problem that I think my impression of that data would be what we want to make sure is it doesn't grow exponentially. It doesn't grow to a problem point. And so how do we make sure that we continue to probably see some of the data sets that we see around the amount of screen time use now that we have?
And I guess I would be a little uncomfortable putting together that type of work study, Director Eastham. Our cell phone work study was to protect instructional time, not to dictate how teachers use instructional time. And, Jason repeatedly tells me that teaching actually is a science and an art that he puts a lot of time into that I, as an untrained professional, don't understand. That's debatable. But all joking aside, I would be hesitant to form a group that tells teachers how to do their jobs when that's what they've been trained to do, and more what the superintendent said is track the data. But I think the perception of what's going on in our classrooms in the community based on some of the things that we were told today may be different than what is going on, because as Adam said, like 4.5 minutes on average a day, or 4.8 minutes was our top app for little kids. So I think it's maybe just to keep an eye on it, but not necessarily get into the level of policy making around how to use devices. I think that kind of infringes on some of our teachers' expertise in an area that I, as a board member, don't feel comfortable that I have something to bring to that conversation.
That's very good remarks. Thank you, Lisa. And I was not thinking about a group to form recommendations, but more of a group to form information for us, right? So thank you for that viewpoint.
Yeah, I absolutely echo Director Williams said. But I do think that it's important for us to have this conversation at the board table because, our parents are watching. They want to make sure that we are asking these questions and getting the answers and monitoring the situation. So I'm really, really grateful to hear that data tonight. That helps me a lot. So thank you very much.
Sorry, I'll just jump in. So $5.86 million about $5.86 million for the Chromebook. Where would that funding come from? SAVE, PEPL, combination?
That'll come mostly from SAVE, and then there's a portion that comes from PEPL, a small portion.
Okay, so later tonight we're going to be talking about the fine arts study, right? And any funding for the fine arts buildings will be coming from SAVE PEPL, okay? And it's interesting to hear about this 24 minutes because I'm just wondering in my head, in my small brain, the K-5, if students are only using a computer 20 minutes a day, do we really need laptop carts for every classroom and one-to-one? I'm just thinking fiscally responsible here because it would seem to me that you would, for 20 minutes, I don't know if you would need that many computers at our elementary level. I can understand the high school because they're going through classes. I can get behind a little bit at the middle school, but I just, with 20 minutes, that seems about like what it was when I was in elementary school and you went and played Number Munchers and Oregon Trail, much less educational perfect as some of these other ones coming out. But Why would we recommend laptop carts for every classroom if it is only 20 minutes a day?
Yeah, so I can weigh in on that at least to some extent. So one of the factors is, as Director Williams shared, that utilization is not going to be the same, every day. There are going to be higher days, there are going to be lower days. And that's a reality we actually saw recently in terms of ISASP testing, which requires students to do that on a device. We have to have, and those of us who were here in the district when we didn't have one-to-one at the elementary level, first of all, we would always strain our time limits to actually get that testing done. We almost certainly would miss some students because we couldn't be as flexible because we had to put devices on trucks and ship them around the district in order to get all of those scheduled and taken care of. That's one example that happens once a year for a week. We do see, however, those sorts of situations where a student spends a period of time, and it might be a relatively short one, but they're doing it on a consistent basis. They're developing, that routine of engaging with whatever it is, adaptive math platforms, for example, and they're doing that on a regular basis. We don't necessarily want a first grader doing that for longer than a few minutes at a time, per some of the things that have been shared, but we do want them doing that on the regular. And so I think that's the primary motivation.
The next question kind of goes to the committee, and I'm just wondering, do we have any medical doctors on that committee, pediatricians, family med docs, anybody from Stead Children's Hospital?
Not that I know of.
I would hope that we would look into adding someone from the medical field into the committee because of their backgrounds, especially we got a well-written email today even from a medical doctor up in North Liberty just talking about his time and the issues that he sees within his medical practice. And we had another doctor here tonight, similar discussions. And then would you say that there are any, I wouldn't say anti-tech, but people that are tech questionable on the committee, where they question the use of technology?
I think some of our teacher librarians would fall into that category. Like, not that they're against it, but they have some similar concerns about the instructional use and where and when is most appropriate. I think they are proponents of it, but they also want to do it the best that they can.
And the reason I ask that is because, oftentimes when we get into these committees where the focus is on a certain issue, we attract people that are pro that issue.
Sure.
And again, some of the pediatricians, I would say to go out and try to get some parents that are tech questionable on there, because we've heard from them, we heard from them tonight, and we've heard from them in emails and other places just to provide that counterpoint and counter narrative.
Sure. Well, and I can speak to the work that we've done, and I can speak to from a curriculum standpoint of how it's used in our curriculum and instruction, and even some assessment opportunities as well. But I appreciate the point.
Yeah. And thank you for your work. That isn't to belittle your work. I hope you don't take it that way. So
no,
thank you.
No, we appreciate the feedback, Director Lingo. I would just say that one thing as a reminder, that was part of some of the limitations about who we could have on a committee too, was also important for us to get that feedback from teachers and from parents as well to inform that recommendation. So I think part of, your original question about, minutes used and then also why we would still recommend that, of course, all of the committee's work was informed by those data points that came back to them. So I think that was another piece with that. Adam did a nice job trying to talk about, opportunities for instruction in there, but I do think as we get more concerns around screen time and some of those, I wonder how we can do a better job working with the health community. We have a good track record of doing that when we've come out of things like the pandemic and know that they want to collaborate with us. And I think we have some effective models to do that. So I think that's certainly some good feedback for us to consider.
Thank you, Patrick. I just have a couple of questions. Can you tell us, for the parent survey, did it go to select buildings, all parents in like K through 5?
I believe it went to K through 5 parents.
I am a K through 5 parent. I received the.
Okay, so every parent
That's my
had
understanding.
the opportunity
That's my
to
understanding,
share that
yeah.
feedback. And I lost track. It is think for Adam, can you remind me when we went one-to-one?
Yeah, so we launched our first one-to-one program in 2017, and that was at the high school level. And then we expanded down to the middle school level in 2019, and then COVID kind of forced our expansion to all grade levels in 2020.
Okay, but we had carts in some of our elementary school with computers, because I just remember in 2019 visiting, and I cannot remember what school it was, but it's one school that has like shared space in the classrooms on the outer perimeter. And one of the biggest pieces that that principal shared was that competing for time. So oftentimes they got complaints from teachers that they all wanted to use the cart at the same time. And so that's one of the reasons why I can see why we don't want shared carts versus having individual carts in classrooms. And I don't know if you dove deep into said cart, just because I just purchased carts for our department for laptops for one of our classrooms. I'm assuming it's one of those carts where the laptop is actually plugged in and being charged, and it has a lock on it.
Yep.
Okay.
That's my understanding of that as well. And I'm familiar with what you were referring to when you were thinking about back to that elementary building, and it was a large competition for making sure your kids had access to what they needed when they needed it. If you have a second grade cart and all the second graders are doing literacy at the same time and then it just creates a lot of logistical headaches sometimes, along with some different issues and things like that. But
And I mean, it's great to hear that we can explore more training on effective use for our students, making sure that we are not maybe causing more issues or strain with their eyes. If any of the kids have eyesight like mine, it was bad at kindergarten. So there would be no training that would help that, but we don't want to make it worse. We want to make sure that we're educating not only our teachers, but our students, reminding them to sit back from it. So that would be helpful if we can ensure that's being done. And then finally, it was great getting the data for tonight, but I would be interested in seeing maybe that data more often. So if we can figure out a way to get that in front of us.
Actually timely. We are just in the process right now of working to implement a system that'll provide us a richer combination of data, and it'll be available all the time. So that'll be certainly something we can bring.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Thank you so much, Patrick.
thanks for your time.
Moving on to our action items for tonight. The first one is the proposed certified budget and tax certification. I don't know if CFO Kerf, you wanted to make some comments?
I just have some really brief comments on this. So one, the budget being proposed to you as a rate of 16.10076. That rate is $0.0003 lower than what we published as our max rate, so almost exactly the same. One of the things that I would highlight, and I've gotten some questions from the community, so just so that you're aware, most of the questions, all but one, have been tied to why isn't our tax rate higher? And people who wish that, because they see uncertainty at the federal level and at the state level. And so I've done a lot of explaining about how Iowa school finance works and the limited level of discretion we have. The budget being proposed is a reduction in levy from last year, a pretty substantial one. It's also a reduction in the actual property taxes collected from last year, not a huge reduction. It's about $2 million, which in the scheme of things is not huge. The drivers behind that, on the negatives, on what's pulling that levy down, is our management fund. So we had 2 years in a row of very aggressive early retirement. That wrapped up because that was tied to our budget reductions. And so that actually substantially impacts our need to levy dollars. And then the other one that is pushing it up a little bit is just our general fund growth. So the budget being presented to you tonight represents modest general fund growth in alignment with what we're allowed to do per the state, along with what's been presented to you in terms of some of those certified budget assumptions about a month and a half ago, and everything that we've talked about in terms of budgeting. So modest growth in the general fund sense. Overall, our levy drops and our total number of dollars collected drops as well.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from directors?
Just to remind people, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we are maxed out on our as much as we can get for the general fund or for money in our general fund, correct?
Correct. We are taking advantage of 100% of the revenues we are allowed to use.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Hearing no other questions or comments, is there a motion?
I move we approve the ICCSD proposed certified budget and tax certification for fiscal year 2026.
Seconded.
Thank you. Board Secretary Coburn, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up on the action items is the Student Chromebook RFP. Any, Superintendent Degner, was anybody from your team wanting to make comments?
I think we're ready to answer questions
Okay.
if you have any, but otherwise we can forego the comments.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from directors?
I don't have any questions. I think we've done a very thorough job of reviewing this course of action, and I'm going to go ahead and vote in favor, as I had said before, after consideration of all of your comments, which have been very helpful to me anyway, in trying to figure out what to do. So thank you.
Any other comments from directors?
I appreciate what you said at the end of the discussion, President Malone, about getting back with some of the information on the screen distance, the time, the training. So frequent updates on that would be very helpful. So thank you.
Thank you.
I would just like to express my appreciation to the superintendent and staff for going out and surveying parents and taking in their opinion, especially on taking Chromebooks home, which is one of the main consternations that I've heard. And if we could keep parents updated on how much time their children are actually spending in the classroom, as that, I would greatly appreciate that.
Hearing no further comments or questions, is there a motion?
I move that we approve this agenda item relating to student Chromebook RFPs, which would be, as I understand it, approving the RFP that was presented in the agenda packet.
Second.
Thank you. Board Secretary Coburn, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Next up is the staff assigned and student lab device RFP. Were there comments or questions from directors? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I move to approve the purchase of the staff assigned and student lab devices.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Hearing none, Board Secretary Coburn, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. And the final action item is for the staff student Mac device RFP. Are there any questions or comments from directors? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I move to approve the purchase of the staff and student Mac OS devices.
Second.
Board Secretary Coburn, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up is our upcoming events and community updates. Our final legislative update will be held this Friday in this room from 4 to 5. Superintendent Degner, did you want to dive into some noteworthy updates?
Yeah, just a couple brief things. Supplemental state aid, we know, is set at 2%, awaiting the governor's signature. The other probably notable movement that happened last week was the civics test for graduation, and then also chronic absenteeism cleanup, getting rid of the certified letter portion of that, which will be important for districts and was honestly a waste of time, in our process. And so that'll be good to have that changed. The one thing I'm just going to ask Adam to touch on really briefly, because this is kind of a high stakes change that would happen at the state level, is the property tax reform. They're somewhat getting closer to a solution. And so just a really quick rundown of the proposal that's in place now. I'm sure it's going to change again if they get something to the finish line, but I think this one's important for you all to be aware of if you're getting questions or communicating with legislators.
Yeah, so just in a nutshell, what the proposal is at the moment is that it would eliminate the residential rollback, which reduces the taxable valuation of a home by roughly 50%. But then it would also, in code, it would reduce most of our fixed levies by half. So like PEPL, instead of $3.34 becomes $1.67. If I'm a homeowner, I end up paying the same thing. My home is worth about twice as much. The levy is half. Our levies, like the one we just set for certified budgeting purposes, float with the amount of dollars we're trying to collect, right? And so the valuation isn't critical. The valuation informs the levy, not vice versa. So our levy will look like it's cut in half, basically, but the impact on a typical homeowner will be they're paying the same thing in future years that they are right now. The one thing I will highlight is that the residential rollback is being removed. Commercial and ag property taxes, the valuation doesn't really change. So for them, the impact is that taxes will essentially be cut in half. The state will backfill some lost revenues from the state's general fund. We have talked about the condition of the state budget, so that gives me some concern. The other factor, though, is that some districts, particularly rural districts or districts with very high percentage commercial property, will be heavily impacted by this in terms of, for example, PEPL revenues, where their PEPL revenues will drop significantly because it's a fixed levy rate informed then by whatever they're getting from property valuation. In Iowa City, the good news for us is that we don't rely heavily on ag or commercial relative to other districts in the state of Iowa. Vast majority of our valuation is residential, and so the impact on us in terms of PEPL revenues will be minimal. Impossible to know for sure right now what that'll be because I'm confident this is going to change a bit, but just some things to be aware of as it relates to how this property tax reform legislation would impact schools.
So the ag and commercial properties are going to benefit from the rollback, but not be affected by the levy.
Correct. And when I was looking at a brief summary from Iowa School Finance Information Services, I believe the percentage of property tax paid by residential properties would go, I want to say, and I'll try to correct myself later if I'm wrong, I think it goes from 54 to 67%. So the burden on residential increases substantially. The burden on both commercial and ag drops.
So again, the residential property taxpayers will be paying more, and commercial and farming taxpayers will be paying less.
Residential property taxpayers will be paying some more potentially for our general fund operations and for other cities and counties. They won't be paying more for something like PEPL. That'll simply cut in half for, the rate cuts in half, valuation doubles. But overall, yes, residential property taxpayers will pay more of the share of property taxes relative to what they do now.
those.
It's not relief for our residential property taxpayers. It's relief for those other categories. Sorry, Director Finch.
Oh, no worries. The data that you shared, that was statewide. Is that what you? Okay. Okay.
All right, thank you all. Next up, just a reminder that Board Docs is moving to the new platform, I can't talk right now, Diligent Community, at our next meeting. So directors, if you set up your password when Board Secretary Coven reminded us, you might want to dig it back up because I forgot mine. I don't know if Superintendent Degner or Board Secretary Coven wanted to make any additional comments.
No, I think we really wanted this one on the agenda for the community's awareness too about accessing meetings and how that would look different. So that will be a different platform. I'm sure there'll be a couple snags, but Kim's been great about taking the learnings from the training and trying to communicate that out to us. So we're thankful for that. And yeah, we all need to find our passwords and get logged in there after this one. So yeah.
All right. Next up is the agenda setting for the May 13th meetings. First up, we will have an operations meeting that will start at 5 o'clock. And we're talking about...
We're talking about funding,
Yes.
that one?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, Director Lingo. So we had kind of talked about the financing behind FMP 2.2. So that could be a potential topic we could take at operations. We would do then the report out at the board meeting and could share some of that. So that would be my suggestion. The other thing is if you wanted that to live in the regular meeting instead of the committee meeting, could be just a follow-up to what Adam was mentioning there. The session should be closed. Their per diem will be over by then. And so we could also talk property tax reform or something that way. But I think my first suggestion would just be that we would take the financing of FMP 2.2 as a learning item there during operations.
I'd be happy with that because it's one of those questions that I get asked all the time, and I am not educated well enough on it. So, thank you.
We'll do it.
And then at 6 o'clock, we'll have our regular meeting. Right now, I'm not seeing a whole lot, so.
Yeah, we'll monitor if we have the feasibility and capacity study by then. It might be more likely to have it the second meeting, just kind of for the community's benefit and yours as well. Just as we monitor that second May meeting, that's when we would ideally like to bring back a more comprehensive version of what FMP 2.2 will look like, what the remainder of the projects were. Of course, the work session we're going to do here after the meeting tonight will inform a large chunk of that FMP 2.2 and some other projects that you've seen here in the past. So we'd probably present at that second May meeting, look for your approval maybe at the first June meeting. So there's a little gap in between your receipt of the information to approval. Iowa School Performance Profiles, Director Finch had brought that up, and that was a good one for us to come back to here. We'll plan on that for the May Ed Committee meeting. And then I think the last thing I have in my notes that I keep forgetting to say is I wanted to welcome Kurt Pratt tonight. He's our Chief Operating Officer sitting there in the front row. I know some of you got to meet him when we did the approval of the personnel report that had his name on it that evening, but it's his first official meeting joining us, so I wanted to make sure to point him out to the rest of you too. But if you guys have other items, that's we'll happily consider those, but that's what I have for this evening.
Oh, sorry. I'm finished. I would like to add a discussion item sometime next month on departmentalization on our elementary schools, since the cat is out of the bag already from elementary teachers that have come to me with questions. So, and people in the community that have heard it through elementary teachers.
The plan that we would like to proceed with is to talk to you a little bit about that in the Ed Committee meeting around Iowa School Performance Profiles. We could talk a little bit about the teaming approach for elementaries there. The thing I would just say initially is we're still in the planning stages of this, so there's not even specifics on commitment. I shared some information with you guys in your board update about some of that work that the team is engaged in. So we'd be happy to talk about that. I don't know that we'll be ready to do it on the 13th, just knowing the schedule of their meetings. So we could either take it the 20th during the Ed Committee meeting or come back that second May meeting. So happy to hear your feedback on that and how we'd like to do that. But I just don't think it'll be quite ready for the 13th.
That sounds good to me. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think if we discuss it at the Ed Committee meeting, if we think we have more questions, want to go further into depth, and maybe we can add it to regular meeting agenda at that point.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I don't know if you're done. Anyway, I just want to say I am not going to be able to make the meeting on the 13th, and I will catch up and watch the meeting. I won't call in, but I do know that we have the closed session following. So, Board Secretary Colvin, I would like to call in for the closed session.
And that takes us to that closed session. It will follow our regular board meeting, and we will be in our normal room for that. Anything else? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Right.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Take maybe, 5-10 minutes, and we'll meet in the back of the room.
Oh, sure, let's just